Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And this week, joining us from Serbia, I think Milica is the first guest that is actually in Serbia while we are recording. Milica, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vasco. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
So Milica is a mom and a professional and organizational coach who is all about dealing with complexity, whether it's child development, I bet many moms out there will relate to that, and many dads as well, or organizational, team, and individual transformation and growth. She found her true calling in the world of Agile, Cynefin, and progressive organizational cultures, all topics I'm sure we're going to touch on during this week. She likes to create safe spaces for innovation, nurture trust, and spark engagement are some of her true passions. Milica, that was a short introduction. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Yeah, that's actually connected to what you just said in the intro. So I finished general linguistics, and when you finish linguistics, at least in Serbia, it's not like you have much of a career kind of happening for you. So what I did is I started my career in kind of project management, sales, a bit of marketing, and then I kind of got interested into digital marketing. I spent a couple of years working as a digital marketing specialist, which led me to a startup. Where I actually started as a digital marketing specialist, but it was a tech startup, and they were kind of already doing Scrum. They had a pretty good setup for for a very new and a small company, and I kind of started to get interested into the whole thing, Scrum, Agile, like the whole philosophy behind. And I kind of started doing it already, doing a Scrum Master thingies on the go because it was just a kind of a natural thing. Then we had a very interesting 360 kind of team assessment that we did, and we did a bit of a reflection where the teammates were like, "Hey, how about you become a full-time Scrum Master for us? It feels like that would be something that you would be good at," which was also kind of connected with that I was actually already passionate about it and was super hooked. So I like to say that it found me, and that was actually the first job. I started first as a kind of a part-time, and then I switched completely to being a Scrum Master for that team, and then kind of the whole thing unraveled in a way.
This sounds like a familiar story. When you said Scrum Mastering found me, I guess at least as I heard it, is more like, okay, I didn't know I was looking for it, but as soon as I saw it, I knew this was for me. Is that how you felt?
Exactly. Like I've had connections, or I'm doing a bit of consultancy with the companies that I worked for in the past while I was still doing project management or digital marketing. Now that I talk to them, they are reminding me of the things that I was doing already then that were very much agile. And I was just not aware that it was, that was it. And, I didn't have the means or the tools to actually do it in a way that would be more beneficial. But I think it was kind of like, I saw it and then I knew it was for me.
Absolutely. It is, I would say, for many of us, and certainly it was for me. I remember that when I started also from a project management background, I did my first Scrum project to prove that it can't work. Of course, I was totally wrong, 100% wrong, because after doing my first project, I realized this is the only way it can work. So it is quite a big transformation. And as we go through this transformation, of course, not all moments are easy. Some are difficult, and we do fail. We all do. And it's important that we share that so that we can get the lessons learned from what others have done and try to either avoid those or learn from it and change our way of doing Scrum Mastering. So, Milica, share with us one of those stories, a difficult moment you had as a Scrum Master. We'll dive into the takeaways and the lessons learned later, but share the story with us first.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about when people ask you about these failures, what is the topic that you share? How do you pick one? That's the most meaningful. And I was getting from the perspective that I would like to share about the one that had the biggest impact on me. I think it was very early in my career, as you become working as a Scrum Master and you start, looking into that world, you're super optimistic, right? There's like this huge hype. You're so into it. You want everyone to know what you know. You want everyone kind of, on board. And I think one of the first mistakes that I made especially in those early days. So I started I started in a company. It was new to me. They already had a lot of processes in place. So they thought they were agile. A lot of things were set up in a scaled Scrum manner. They made their own framework around that. As I said, a lot of teams were already very, very well set into the Scrum and everything around it. And then there was also on the other side, a lot of these cultural aspects and a lot of values that the company shared that were very much in line with what we would consider culturally progressive or very agile, etc. And so I came into that kind of setup. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. We're going to do a lot of different things. And I think one of the mistakes that I made, and I think very often a lot of other Scrum Masters also make, is assuming things. So I didn't give myself enough time to actually assess and, try and figure out, is there a cognitive dissonance here happening?
So what were some of the things that you assumed as you were going into this company?
Yeah, that's exactly what so I assume that transparency is just what we have in place, that we are taking everything in a very transparent way. And the thing that happened is that at some point I asked a procedure from, I think, HR to be shared in one of the Slack channels or something. And that became a bomb. So they didn't want to share that. It ended up, we also ended up realizing that it's not as transparent as we thought it was. And I was very bluntly pushing for that to become transparent. So I was like, yeah, beautiful. Why don't you share it here in this chat so that everyone can see it? And they're like, no, how about we send you privately? And I'm like, well, okay, but why don't we still? So I think, when you're into that belief that certain things are the way that they should be, and you're super optimistic, you are lacking the ability to actually assess the level of transparency, the level of ownership that the company has, the level of ability to adjust to certain things. So I think that was probably my biggest learning, that kind of to really take my time when I entered the new company or the new team, to really take my time and not assume that because certain things are in place as the processes are, and we have a beautifully communicated values and things around that it will also be implemented in a way that it's lived throughout the company, so that you don't push for certain things when the time is not right.
So I happen to think that it's quite difficult not to assume things. I mean, it kind of happens also intuitively, right? Like we can't validate everything that we can, like assuming that transparency is in place is a great example. We can't validate that transparency is in place in all aspects that we might think it is in place. So one of the things that come to my mind is to go in with this perspective of curiosity. And what I mean by that is like a very practical way to put this in practice is to use questions like, what if, have you considered, how about, what have you done in the past when, and kind of not necessarily with the idea of assessing, which we are doing by asking those questions, of course, but rather with the idea of allowing the organization to reveal itself, right? Like to show what it really is without us, even though we do assume, and I don't think we can 100% avoid that, but without us imposing our assumptions on the conversation. How did you do it then after that? Because of course you learned from that. So these days, how do you do it? How do you go into organizations and try not to act on your assumptions?
I think the first thing, as you just put it beautifully, is that you are aware of this confirmation bias, that you are there, and then what are the things that you can do to avoid it? And as you said, kind of using these exploratory questions. So trying to understand, getting a bit more into this diagnostics mode. And when I say diagnostics, as you said, not from the perspective of doing a questionnaire and kind of but rather focusing on being exploratory. So what would happen if we would do this? Asking hypothetical questions, both with individuals, teams, and also in different departments. I think, as you probably also saw, when you implement and when the organizations are in the process of transitioning towards a more agile ways of working, not everything goes kind of at the same time. So you often see marketing kind of probably or usually being one of the last things that you'll, try and transform. So kind of looking into these different departments and trying to understand how they work and what is their truth about the level of transparency is also what is important. So I think, but starting with awareness of that this confirmation bias is there and that we're often assuming, and it's just the way that our brain works and it's easier for us to do it that way, I think that helps a lot.
And by the way, it can be a strength if we are able to use the exploratory mindset, because then we might be in a positive and, as you called it, optimistic mindset, which it actually infects others, right? Like it makes it better for us to do our work if we are, as a countermeasure, able to express that curiosity mindset. So it's a great story. Thank you for sharing that with us, Milica.
Thank you.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests help their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.